Hi folks, good morning and welcome to the Southern Necropolis, the Gorbals' very own City of the Dead. My name's Colin Mackie, aka the Happy Reaper from Friends of Southern Necropolis, and behind the camera is my good lady wife Elsie. And today accompanies on the following tour is my two good friends Christine Malavi Quarrel, artist and poet, and John Hutchison, author and storyteller and musician. So what we're going to do now is we're going to turn around and Elsie's going to show you the gatehouse of the Southern Necropolis. As you enter the Southern Necropolis, you'll come underneath the archway of our grand beloved gatehouse. The gatehouse itself was built in 1848 and designed by Glasgow architect Charles Wilson. To your right hand side of the gatehouse you see the tower, which had an internal spiral staircase that would take you to the first floor, which would have been the committee room, with the committee that was run at the time by Archibald Edmondson and Colin McLaws, which is roughly a 6x4 living room. And then back into the tower you would go up the stairs to take you to the roof to give you a bird's eye view of the cemetery. Bottom left room would have been for the gardener and grave diggers, and originally the gatehouse would have had a cast iron gate on it, which we sadly lost a good few years ago. The hopes of the future is to restore the gatehouse and have it turned into a community and resource centre for the community and visitors alike. Now, we've got a photograph of Charles Wilson. This is the architect who designed the gatehouse, and Charles Wilson is a permanent resident of the Southern Necropolis at the back left quarter of the central section, and we'll show you Charles's grave during the tour. Now, before I forget, as health and safety dictates, usually if the physical visitors come down, we have to let you know it should be, in the event of a fire, there's only one way out of the cemetery, and that's out through the arch of the gatehouse. But this won't happen today because the sun's shining on us. So if you'd like to join me folks, we'll take you around and introduce you to some of the characters of the cemetery. Thank you. How you doing? There are many examples of various monuments in the cemetery, and this is a classic example of three bronzes. We've got three bronzes in the Southern Necropolis, and this is John McNaught, master blacksmith from Glasgow in the Gorbals, and we have got a really nice scene on the stone. It's in bronze. As you can see, there's a scene of the blacksmith at work. We've got some of the tools of the trade, we've got the anvil, and we've got some of the characters working within. Unfortunately, one of the characters on my bronze scene lost a head a few years ago, and sadly we've not been able to locate it, but it might be somewhere around the cemetery, and maybe in the future a bit of restoration work. The lettering on the stone was painted and highlighted again for us a couple of years ago by a local monumental sculptor, Stuart Craig, who will be doing some more enhancement projects in the future for us in the cemetery. I'm sure you'll agree it's a beautiful granite stone, and a few years ago it was actually lying, the top part was lying face up, and bereavement services arranged to get it erected back on top of the stones. It's a beautiful, beautiful monument. We'll take you back onto the central path. The central section was opened in 1840. The cemetery itself, the land on it was acquired from a local merchant and bailey, William Gilmore, who lived in Oatlands House. Oatlands House was a small mansion not far from the cemetery, and those of you with any Gorbals history knowledge or Oatlands history will know that it was on the location of what used to be the St Bonaventure's Chapel building, which is no longer there. So that's where the mansion would have been. William Gilmore agreed to have the land used for the cemetery with the understanding that the graves would be available to the working classes, which was roughly about 6 pennies a week to pay up a layer, which gave people a lot of opportunity for a lot of respectable burials. If you'd like to follow me, I'll show you our next character. We've got arrows throughout the cemetery. We've got an on-site heritage trail with 31 characters, various characters for various aspects of social history. This one, to my right, the arrow pointing in when you come down, is the grave of Thomas Boland Seath, who was a boat builder. Thomas had a boatyard in Partick and then later on in Rutherglen. There's a street up in Rutherglen named after him, and the road at the back of Rutherglen is called Seath Road, that would have took you to his original boatyard. This is the grave of Thomas Boland Seath and his family. Sadly lost a lot of children very, very young of age. It's at the back of the stone, there's an inscription on it. This is number 3 in my trail. The Thomas Bowen Seath was famous for the small boats that he made, cluthers. Very small marine, they were known as marine omnibuses. Very small little crafts that used to take passengers up and down the Clyde for a small fee. And this is Thomas Bowen Seath, who's buried in number 3 in our Heritage Trail. It's another classic example of the links that the cemetery can give to social history. If you come back onto the central path, we'll lead you up to our next character. There's approximately 250,000 burials in the southern necropolis, 250,000. There are 3 sections in the cemetery. There's the central, opened in 1840. There's the eastern, which was later opened in 1846. And there's the western, which was opened and extended into the western section in 1850. And the western section is the largest part of the cemetery, where the final burial place of Alexander Greek Thompson, the architect. And we have a Commonwealth corner in that part of the cemetery dedicated to the war dead throughout the cemetery. This one again, onto the Heritage Trail, number 31, as you come to the end of the trail when you're walking round, is the Goldie family. The Goldie family were brick builders in Glasgow, and they were famous for the bricks work on Templeton's carpet factory and Fairfield Yard in Govan. It's a lovely monument. It's got leaded lettering on it, standing proud for the Goldie family. Number 31. So you come down, you'll have a trail. We've got little brochures that's got a map in the first page, and all the graves for the characters are numbered on the map, and they correspond to the various biographies in the booklet, and they fill you in some of the lives and achievements of those buried within. There's a big mixture of history in the southern necropolis. We like to think there's no class distinction in the cemetery. You've got mill workers, mill owners, you've got bankers, colliery workers, teachers, a whole mishmash of different aspects of social history. We've also got a tree trail in the cemetery. We've got little markers on the trees with names of the trees in Latin. And the trees coming up the central path are Prunus avium, and they're wild cherry trees. To my left, we've got number 4. This is a great link to the theatrical side of the cemetery. And this is William Scotch Williams, who is noted on his grave as being a comedian. That was his stage name, William Scotch Williams. And he tread the boards at Sadler's Wells and many theatres across the country. And he lived in a cottage up in Pollokshaws Road in Glasgow. So the arrow again points you in. Really nice trees in the cemetery, very characteristic, some of the trees. As you can see, we've got a little tags on them. This was done, we're going to further expand the tree trail for local schools and community groups and set up a separate mind maps trail for the trees themselves, so you can come in and follow and plot the trees and learn about the kind of environmental and biodiversity aspects of the cemetery. Now you find us at our beautiful Franciscan Circle. This is the spot. My good lady wife and I were married 2015 at this spot, and there's a plaque on it. It's not for our wedding. This is the plaque to commemorate the reinterment of the Franciscan benefactors in 2003. There was an excavation carried out up near High Street, and they found the remains of the Blackfriars Monastery. And within the excavation they found the remains of 20 skeletons. They did DNA tests on them, kind of like CSI, and they found it was 12 male, 7 females, and 1 sample they couldn't determine enough whether it was animal or human. Because of the female aspect of it, they determined it was Franciscan benefactors to the order, and because of the links with the local Franciscan order with St Francis's Chapel, they brought them here and reinterred them on this very spot. And I have a photograph of the reinterment I can show you to give you a visual idea of what it looked like at the time. This was back in 2003, and that's the reinterment there. That's the caskets going down in each side of the circle with the silver birch tree in the middle, which is now, you can appreciate, 17 years ago, so the tree's obviously well established itself. Now if you look at the seats on it, there's seats set in place at the circle. Set in place are two inserts of stones, and these are from the original water well at the Blackfriars Monastery in the High Street. There's actually a Franciscan garden set up at the High Street, and there's a feature, like a circular kind of well feature, with two stones missing, and these were located down here on our seats at the cemetery. Friends of Song Necropolis have been working on enhancing the circle as well, and we recently put new stones etc. down. We're going to be working on it again in the future. So we're now going to take you to the next character on the trail. You can see there's a lot of different variations in stone types in the cemetery, and again there are some graves that don't have stones on them, but at that point when the cemetery opened it was more important to get a decent burial ground for members of your family, and then obviously the stones came later on if you could afford them. There would have been monumental sculptures based in the cemetery that you could probably purchase stones for. We have a lot of really nice stones, a lot of different styles of inscriptions, different stone types, granite, sandstone, marble, etc. And as I said before at the start of the tour, the Southern Necropolis has many different links to the social history of Glasgow, theatrical, etc. And we're going to take you to the grave of James and Christina Bayliss. And James Bayliss set up the Milton Coliseum Theatre in Howcaddens, then the Scotia Theatre, and later on in his life, him and his wife were famous for the Theatre Royal in Glasgow. And we shall take you to the grave of James and Christina, and we'll hand you over to our good friends John and Christine. Belt.
I wish I was in Glasgow with some good old friends of mine, some good old rough companions, some good old smooth red wine. We would talk about the old days, the old town's sad decline, and drink to the boys on the road. I was born in Glasgow, on the south side of the town. I'd take you there and show you, but they pulled the old place down. And when I think about it, it always makes me frown. They bulldozed it all to make a road. That good old place I miss so much, now see some better days. Yet still we talk about it as we go our separate ways. Glasgow gave me more than it ever took away, and prepared me for life on the road. My granny was a cleaner, my granddad drove a tram, my father an engineer. They made me what I am. They have seen the city come and go, and still they give a damn. They prepared me for life on the road. I belong to Glasgow, that's how the old song ran. Ask anyone who's been there, they will understand. You can take the man from Glasgow, but not Glasgow from the man. It prepares you for life on the road. That good old place I miss so much now, sees some better days. Yet still we talk about it as we go our separate ways. Glasgow gave me more than it ever took away, and prepared me for life on the road. Glasgow gave me more than it ever took away, and prepared me for life on the road.
I think I'm okay without it. Thanks, John. I love that song. And you sung it as good as Billy Connolly. I'm going to read a poem about a much loved man from right here in our Gorbals community. Benny Lynch, a world champion at only 22. Sadly, Benny passed too early, but he left the world a wonderful legacy. Not only of his sporting accomplishments, but of his values, Gorbals' values of kindness and always remembering his own folk. The Gorbals community of his times, early 1900s, supported Benny through very hard times. Benny never forgot that support. And this poem is a little bit of a reflection on one of his simple but memorable acts of generosity for which he was so famous. And it's called Our Benny. Gies a chip, the wains cry, frying tonight, hi, hi, hi. Wee bit of fish me for your way, salt and vinegar, try not to pay. Hungry, hungry all the time, Benny, Benny, spare a dime. Here he comes dancing down the street, magic pockets and magic feet. Who all wants chips, our Benny says, hunters of wains all run out. Benny's paying, he's got the cash, Hale Street running quick as a flash. Chip shop woman piles in mare, fat as bubbling, spits to the flare. Faster, faster chips are made, nae hungry wains to bed the night. Benny's our hero and Benny can fight. Benny, 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 they shout. We can't forget ye gied us all chips. Oh Benny, we're name we I praise. A statue to you one day we will raise. And I would just like to thank everyone in the Remembering Benny Lynch Statue campaign, particularly Lynn Lees, the founder, but also a big thanks to another wonderful twosome, Mags and Jim Watt, who, when they heard that poem, Mags immediately sent a £50 note off to Lynn Lees to go into the campaign. More kindness from Benny supporters, of which Mags and Jim Watt are two of the best, and a lovely kindness and a wee lift to my creative self. Also want to send a warm hello to all Benny's lovely family in Scotland and Canada, from the Gorbals community and from everyone here today at the world famous southern Necropolis. Thank you.
Hi folks, so there you go. It's a nice contribution from Christine and John there. Christine is a poet and artist in Glasgow, and John, as I said at the start, is a folk musician, kind of author if you like. He's wrote many stories and poems, etc., and songs, and he's a very expert in Burns. And we'll be taking you to a link as again as an example of just how many social history links the cemetery's got. We'll be taking you along to the Bedgrave later in the tour, who is the nephew and great nephew of our famous bard, none other than Robert Burns. And John's going to give us a couple of wee more musical contributions, as is Christina as well. Now, as you know, cemeteries are famous for so many things, and most cemeteries have got iconic stones in them. They've got local legends that kind of keep them alive, pardon the pun if you like. We've got a lot of butterflies today in the cemetery, I'm just noticing. Red admirals, just 3 together. I don't know if that's a good sign. I think it might be quite lucky. 3 red admirals all together, and I believe that butterfly means soul, and that's a good example of the kind of biodiversity of the cemetery. Now we're coming to one of our famous iconic monuments, and this is a monument that's known as the legendary White Lady, and this is the final resting place of John S. Smith, carpet manufacturer. And as you can see in the inscription at the bottom, we've got Mary McNaughton, the housekeeper, and we've got Magdalene Blair, his wife, his widow. What happened in November 1933, both ladies were crossing the road at Langside at Queen's Park, and the Glasgow Herald and the Mitchell Library fills us in some of the details. They stepped out in the road, it was a winter's night, and sadly they walked in front of a tram car, and both ladies were hurt in the accident, and 2 weeks later they both passed away. This monument, the local legend says, if you walk past her you have to go around her 3 times, so anytime you come down physically in the future, health and safety, but walk round her, don't run round her, walk round her in 3 times and say her name 3 times, and should she turn her head and look at you, she might turn you to stone. People have been leaving coins on the White Lady as well for good luck too. It's a really beautiful stone, and again it's a great example of local legends and myths for the community, and a lot of the local children still know her, and they still know about the story, and schools have been down and they walk around and they know about the three walk rule. So anytime you're down in the future, pay the White Lady a little visit. Now if you walk over with me, they say there's lots of different stones in the cemetery. There's a granite, another granite stone. Granite's a great kind of material to have stone made into it for headstones if you're going to be doing family history, because the inscription tends to kind of last longer on granite. And a lot of the stones in the cemetery, the usual kind of question we get asked is, can you not re-erect them all and stand them up? But some of the older ones wouldn't really take getting moved about too much, so bereavement services has kind of laid them down, and most of them are laid with the inscription face up. This one is another example of a monument. It's cast iron. The monumental sculptors of the time in the Southern Necropolis had different ideas, obviously, to try and make money and be more unique in their approach to it. And this would be a cast iron. There's screws inside for an insert. Might have been an extended obelisk on it or some other kind of decorative feature. And there would have been inserts inside, maybe slate with inscriptions on it. We, the Friends of Southern Necropolis, had funding a couple of years ago from the Gorbals Ideas Fund, and we put flowers inside it and to enhance it a little bit. So it's gave it a little bit of life again to the cemetery. So it's a lovely example of the kind of variation in stonemasons and monumental sculptures throughout the cemetery. Now back on the path again, we're walking up to the back of the central section. Again, the cemetery covers so many aspects of social history, and there's so many valuable assets to the cemetery. The educational aspects of it. Friends of Southern Necropolis have linked up with local schools in the past, and we did a Resurrecting History project where we introduced children to the cemetery and the local history. And as well as introducing them to local history, it kind of expands them to use other attributes. They use internet, they use books, storytelling, PowerPoint presentations. And we had one of the children in one of the schools actually did a presentation about Sir Thomas Lipton, and she was so chuffed to find out that the bottle of Lipton's iced tea that she was getting from a local shop had a local link to a family in the area. Now the next stone on my right hand side is on my character trail, and this is a famous name for a lot of Glaswegians, is Alan Glenn, who was responsible for the school up near the Glasgow Royal back in the day. It's a lovely little stone. At the side of the stone you'll see little kind of columns with metal parts coming out for dukes. There would have possibly been at one time chains coming out to kind of border the grave, and these were taken away a few years ago. Obviously it's more easier for the grass cutters to come in. So that's a lovely pink granite stone. To my right up here We've got the grave of Wilhelmina Elvin Woyka, who was present at the setting up of the British Women's Temperance Association. And Wilhelmina Woyka was quite well off in her day, and her and her friends would go up to the city centre, to Glasgow Cross, with their husbands in the background, keeping an eye on them, and they would give food and clothes to the needy within the city. So it's a lovely little stone. It's Wilhelmina Woyka, and they're links with the Woyka Timber Company as well. All the rows of the Southern Necropolis are all different. They've got different price bands. If you see the maps for the cemetery, if you want to get in touch with the Friends of Southern Necropolis, we can fill you in and stuff like that. You've got 21 shillings is the cheapest layer in the cemetery. If you get buried in here, 21 shillings would be cheapest. The wall stones that go around the perimeter of the wall, they started from £9 till £12. So a little bit more expensive. But again, the whole aspect of being able to pay up a layer was so great for the community, people in the community, to be able to afford a grave, an affordable and respectable place of burial. That's the way they promoted the cemetery. This stone here is in Mourtrail again, and this is a famous family. Those of you who have heard of the name of George Parsonage, George at the Humane Society House at the Clyde. Well, this was the family that before the Parsonages was the Geddes family, and you can see on the stone. Stones are very informative, can give you a lot of links to the past and people's occupations, etc. George Geddes, Humane Society officer, and a life of honour and of worthy and eternity on earth. And it said, faithful public servant for 45 years and rescue of over 100 persons from drowning. It's a nice little stone, and that's on our Heritage Trail. We've actually got a mind maps online as well. If you go to the website, southernecropolis.co.uk, you can get access to the mind maps, and it will show you on a Google map. This one here, which we'll be working on to enhance it. It's a future project. We've got a few projects for the Friends of Southern Necropolis to enhance throughout the cemetery. Is the Adds Heads family, who were jewellers and stationers in Glasgow, and they were famous for the Adds Heads Guide to Glasgow. If you go to a website called archive.org, you can actually get access to the original. It was like kind of yellow pages of the day, where you could find out about tram times, opening times of shops, businesses, etc. It's a lovely granite stone there with a crucifix on it. We're hoping to enhance, we will be enhancing that in the future with stones around the outside of it, maybe some flowers, etc. on it. Friends of Southern Necropolis are usually here on a Sunday from 12 o'clock till 2. Under normal circumstances, you could come down and say hello. If you feel like coming down to do some enhancement work in the cemetery with us, if you're good at gardening, etc., come down. Even come down to do a little basic litter pick, which we do every Sunday as well. And you find so many things about the cemetery, and it's a great place for mental health benefits, because it's a great place to walk. It's a green space, if you like, in its own right, because when Charles Wilson built the gatehouse, the cemetery then was established as a garden cemetery, because it was laid out in uniformed rows with flowered features throughout the cemetery and trees, etc. So it's a really nice place to come. Then we get back into the central path, and here again is where markers on the trees. It's a rowan tree. We've got 4 rowans at this point, and usually in the summer we usually get daffodils coming up at the corners as well. Again, a great variety of different stone types in the cemetery. You've also got this gentleman here on Mourtrail, and this is John Robertson, who was responsible for the engine for the steamship Comet. It's another one of our bronze stones that we've got. It's one of these stones that people say when they stand at it as if the eyes follow you. And this is the gentleman John Robertson. This monument was erected in 1912 by members of the Institution of Engineers and Shipbuilders in memory of John Robertson, who did the engine for the steamship Comet. And this is a photograph of John Robertson standing at the very engine that he designed and built. And that's John Robertson there. He built the engine for the steamship Comet. The Comet was built by a guy called Henry Bell. And Henry Bell has a monument, an obelisk monument down at the front at Helensburgh. Anytime you're down there, you can pay a little visit to it. The monument's there dedicated to Henry Bell. But this is John Robertson of the steamship engine for the Comet. Take you back to the path, and we're going to go down to our next character. A lot of the stones you get in the Southern Necropolis, you've got sandstone monuments. Sadly, the sandstones don't fare too well to the weather, and we lose a lot of inscriptions on them. So Again, it's good to find when you do genealogy. I was just seeing a little squirrel running by there. When you do genealogy, it's great to find a headstone, but I'm always quite disappointed when I find one that's got some sandstone and you miss some. But there's good records at the Mitchell Library. We're very blessed to have the Mitchell Library in the archive department, the Glasgow room, etc., because they've got lots of great archives up there. And when access is available again, you'll get a chance to go up and access the records. This is a lovely Celtic cross in the cemetery, and it's got leaded lettering on it, and it's Thomas McKinnon, 2nd Lieutenant, 3rd Royal Scots Fusiliers. As I say, we've got 27 Commonwealth war graves in the cemetery, and we also have family graves that mention family members that have fallen in the Great Wars. Now, as I say, the cemetery itself has got lots of social history links and lots of stories to be told from the cemetery and from characters within. And we're going to go to the grave of one such man, Hugh MacDonald, who's famous for a book called Rambles Round Glasgow. And the ramblers at that time were people who got together and went for walks at the outskirts of the city along the banks of the Clyde. And Hugh MacDonald got these all recorded in a book, and if you ever get a chance to read it, you can get it online. You'll see he describes his walks throughout the city, and we shall take you to the grave of Hugh MacDonald. And another contribution from John and Christine. Nice shelter for one of our nice trees. Another example of the environmental benefits of the cemetery.
I'll do a couple of wee quick poems now in the Scottish dialect, which I absolutely love. We have a wonderful language here in Scotland. First thing I'll do is be a favourite of mine, Robert Burns. We will come to shortly in the cemetery. He does have a connection with the cemetery, and we'll come to that shortly. But this is On a Wag in Mauchline. Lament to Mauchline husbands all, he aften did assist ye, for had ye stayed here weeks awa, your wives they ne'er had missed ye. Now Mauchline bairns is on ye past to school and bands together, tread ye lightly on his grass, perhaps he was your father. And this next poem is by Hugh MacDonald. I've no doubt that Colin has told you all about him there, and this one's called My Ain Hearth Stane. 'Tis sweet when smiling summer flings her mantle o'er the lea, when scented flowers unfold their bloom and birds are on glee, to wander where the wimpling burn or mang the woods alane, but sweeter, dearer to the heart, our ain hearth stane. When gloaming spreads out o'er the scene her dewy wings o' grey, and brings the pluming frae the fir, the shepherds frae the brae. How sweet the winsome wifey's smile, the prattling o' the wain, that welcome weary labour to his ain hearthstane. My hame is but a lowly bield, a wee bit button ben. I came into a crooked bike that grandeur Disney ken. Yet pride within her lofty was, amid her menial train, might envy me the treasures o' my ain hearthstane. O gouder gear I mauna speak, false fortune still my fee. She grudged me e'en the timmer spoon, the breek so hodden grey. Our kale she aye sends through the reek, and clean we pike the bane. Yet love makes licht o' poortith at my ain hearthstane. Or weel I love wi' general friends a social night o' glee, when sang and crack around the bowl gar all life's shadows flee. But bicker joys are fleeting o', and soon the heart is fain to toddle hame repentant to its ain hearthstane. There's jags on ilka path o' life, and ilka cup there's go, but poortith bides the sarest dunce on mortal pows that fa. For lowly toil meets cankert words and looks o' sore disdain, and worth maun snow to screen frae want her ain hearthstane. We've all our ain but we're to dree, our ain but work to day, and some maun hurkle doon the how, while others spill the brae. But in the dub or on the dyke, you'll find it's on wave. To look for lasting pleasure, half your ain hearthstone.
That was great contribution there from John. The great thing, Hugh MacDonald, it expands again the kind of many various contributions to the people that's buried in the Southern Necropolis. When we do the tours in the Southern Necropolis, we always emphasise, obviously at the start of my tours, that this first and foremost is a burial ground for 250,000 people. But the fact of the matter is, there's stones in here with inscriptions on them, and there's words on the inscriptions, and if you read them, there's stories to be told for so many different kind of avenues of Glasgow history, and it's great to remember people and what the things that they did in their life. One important figure in the cemetery is obviously Charles Wilson. We're going to take you to his grave, and Charles Wilson was responsible for designing the gatehouse of the Southern Necropolis, built in 1848, and it's managed to stand through 2 world wars and the demolition of the nearby Caledonia Road flats that were demolished a few years ago, and it's still with us. It's a beautiful little building, and Charles Wilson was also responsible for designing Rillegan Town Hall, the building that was once known as the Great Eastern Hotel on Duke Street, which is now 100 Duke Street with flats in it, parts of Park Circus, and Gartnavel Royal, the old Gartnavel Royal building, which was once Glasgow Lunatic Asylum. And this is the final resting place of the great man and his family, Charles Wilson. And we've got plans in the future to do this as an enhancement feature as well for Friends of Southern Necropolis. We've presently put a little planter on it with some poppies in it, and the poppies have flowered, which is really nice. Another symbolic aspect of their life within the city of the dead. And we're going to get the lettering painted. Hope we get Stuart Craig, monumental sculptor, to come down and paint the lettering in black for us, and we'll enhance the grave in some way with maybe flowers or decorative stones. So it's a really nice way to highlight the great man himself. And this is a photograph again of Charles Wilson, architect from Glasgow. So I think it'd be a great testament to the man, that the fact we've mentioned him. And obviously every time you come into the cemetery, you're passing through his grand gatehouse. So hopefully in the future we'll get funding and we can get it restored, and next time you're down you can come up to the committee room. And we might be wearing period costumes, who knows, and you get a nice wee cup of tea, Lipton's tea of course, when you come for your visit. If you follow me, we'll head down and go back to the path. There's so many different values to the cemetery. As we say, there's historical values for learning about the past and the characters and the way the city, Glasgow, lived. But the original project, I was connected to the Southern Necropolis back in 1988. I was fortunate enough to be employed as a research officer in the very first pioneering Southern Necropolis research project that was set up by the late Charlotte Hutt. And Charlotte Hutt was an English guidance teacher from Adelphi Secondary School, which I also had the privilege to go to. And Charlotte had the vision of starting the project up and the drive behind it. And the research project ran for 2.5 years, and the idea was to record all the graves, highlight any characters at the time, promote the kind of historical aspect of it. She even had ideas down in one of the notes that she took to have it for venues, for corporate visits and weddings. And as I've just told you earlier on the tour, Elsie and I we've had our wedding in the Southern Necropolis, so it's a great unique venue for it. For anybody that's got any ideas in the future that want to arrange a wedding, just let us know. We know how to set it up because we've done it. It can be done. Charlotte, as I say, the project ran for 2.5 years. She managed to publish a book called City of the Dead, which you can still get. It's quite rare, but you can still get it online. And then later there was another publication done with an additional map and additional kind of information in it. So there's lots of scope in the cemetery for learning. There's another cracking example of a grave. This is layer number 176, 1768 and 1767. A lot of the stones have got layer numbers on them. Unfortunately, not all of them. So if you're doing research, you're looking for a stone, they're not all got numbers on them, but it's a great example of the kind of different font styles on it and the work that's went into those stones to carve it. Monumental symbolism is this downturned torches represents a life that's been extinguished. And again, there's so many different examples of monumental symbolism in the cemetery. You've got doves on them, on the stones representing hope. You've got fingers pointing down, you've got fingers pointing up. Fingers pointing down, telling you obviously where the person is, and fingers pointing up to where the spirit or wherever you believe goes to. Now we're going to come up to the entrance to the eastern section. The eastern section was extended by land acquired from William Gilmore once again, and they extended the cemetery into this part. It runs along parallel to Caledonia Street. And we're going to take you to a grave of one of our other residents, if you like, who's got famous poetic links. It's the nephew and great nephew. Well, John Begg, the nephew of Robert Burns, a famous poet. So many different links. It's a great kind of social kind of chain, if you like. It's in the Southern Necropolis. It gives you kind of peeks into the past. Charlotte Hut christened the Southern Necropolis a window on time, and it's quite a great way to kind of think of it, because you're opening a window and you're looking into the past as well. And we can learn so much from the past. We can learn a lot of things, and we can expand in lots of for children especially, learning through local history. It can encourage them to learn about other things further afield. This is James Banks McNeil's grave as well, by the way, who was a lifesaver in Glasgow, and he's right next to the Beggs. And I'm going to hand you back over to the good friend John.
Thanks, Colin. Well, as Colin mentioned here about the grave of the Beggs, who were related to Robert Burns. I think the Beggs married Burns' niece, the daughter of Burns' younger sister. But I'll do a couple of things connected with Burns now. Where hae ye been, say braw lad? Where hae ye been, say brankie o? Where hae ye been, say braw lad? Come ye by Curly Crankie o? I and ye hae been where I hae been. Ye wadna been, say Canty o? I and ye hae seen what I hae seen on the braes o' Curly Crankie o. I fought in land, I fought at sea, at hame I fought with my auntie o. But I met the devil and Dundee on the braes o' Curly Crankie o. I and ye hae been where I hae been. Ye wadna been, say Canty o. I and ye hae seen what I hae seen on the braes o' Curly Crankie o. The bald put car, he fell in a far, and clavers go to Clanky o. For I had fed an Arthur glad, and deals by Curly Crankie o. I and ye hae been where I hae been. Ye wadna been, say Canty o. I and ye hae seen what I hae seen on the braes o' Curly Crankie o. A fie Mackie, where Garchie lie, the busher yon the brankie o. Ye'd better kiss King Willie's loof than come ye by Curly Crankie o. I and ye hae been where I hae been. Ye wadna been, say Canty o. I and ye hae seen what I hae seen on the braes o' Killiecrankie, oh. There's nae shame, nae shame, nae shame to Swankie, oh. There's sewer sleighs on Athol braes and deals by Killiecrankie, oh. Aye, and ye have been where I have been, ye wouldna been sae canty, oh. Aye, and ye have seen what I have seen on the braes o' Killiecrankie, oh. I'll do a few verses. It's quite apt. Burns wrote a wonderful poem called Death in Dr. Hornbook. Burns wrote a wonderful poem called Death in Dr. Hornbook, quite apt here in the cemetery. Quite a long poem, so I'll not go through the whole thing. But it all happened because one of the locals in the village near where I lived at the time, a school teacher called John Wilson, had a wee sideline selling potions and giving folk free advice on all things medicinal, and Burns wasn't too happy about the gullible getting relieved of their money for this, but it's called Death in Dr. Hornbook. Some books are lees frae end to end, and some great lees were never penned. Even ministers, they hae been kenned in Hayley Rapture, a rousing wid at times to vend, and nailed with scripture. But this that I am going to tell, which lately on a night befell, is just as true as the deals in hell or Dublin city, that ere he nearer comes your cell, it's a muckle pity. The clacking yill had made me canty. I wasna fou, but just had plenty. A stack of twiles, but yet took 20 to free the ditches, and hillocks, stains, and bushes kenned I frae ghaists and witches. The rising moon began to glower, the distant Cumnock hills out o'er. To count her horns with all my power I set mysel', but whether she had 3 or 4, I couldna tell. I was come round about the hill and toddling down on Willie's mill, and set my staff with all my skill to keep me sicker. The leeward whiles against my will, I took a bicker.
Once again, folks, that's a great example of some of the social kind of links, if you like, worldwide links, if you think of it, through Robert Burns and the great works that he done. And this is the grave that was tidied up through Friends of Song Necropolis and the Bristol Burns Club as well. We did the stones on it, the beg grave, and behind it, as I said before, James Banks McNeill, who was a lifesaver in Glasgow. You see in the stone as well that James Banks McNeill inscribed on it as a gentleman saving a lady from the waters of perhaps the Clyde or somewhere further afield, but that's another example of social history. We're going to take you back up to the path, and we're going to head up to the next couple of characters, and again fill you in some of the kind of different achievements and contributions that these people made to the kind of structure of the life of the city, if you like. The stories that Charlotte was really interested in kind of painted so many different pictures of what was going on in Glasgow at the time. We've got a character in the cemetery called Wee Willie White, who was a blind flute player, and he was a busker at the salt market, and he was kind of one of the many famous characters, along with the likes of Rab Haw, the Glasgow glutton. And Penny a Yard was a guy who basically sold string for a penny a yard. Well, Wee Willie White's buried in the western section, and he's got a nice wee grave. It was set up there by his friends because when he died, he lived in the salt market and he died and he was known as respectable poverty, and his friends erected a grave for him and a headstone as well. So, as we're walking up in the eastern section, just to fill you in again, the eastern section was extended in 1846, and William Gilmore was approached again by Colin Sharp McLaws and Archibald Edmondson to extend the cemetery, and he agreed to it because he obviously knew the importance of it, to allow the working classes to get a kind of opportunity to purchase a lair for their families. Looking through minutes, it's mentioned by William Gilmore that he had an idea at the time, in the early days of the Song of Necropolis, to set up a school for orphans in the area, but sadly William Gilmore died in 1848 and his wishes weren't carried out. But again, the cemetery, this part of the cemetery, as we're going to show you a couple of characters, has got Archibald Sinclair, who was the founder of the Celtic Press in Glasgow, and we have got William Cameron, who was a poet and pawnbroker in Glasgow, another poet in the cemetery as well, poet and pawnbroker. As you can see, I'm walking backwards, but I'm doing it healthy and safely. I'm looking forward and seeing where I'm going. William Cameron has wrote many poems. He wrote poems about Dunoon, which is a favourite part of the country, and he wrote many poems about his wife as well. You can see him, he's got a marker. He's not actually got a head in the trail. When you get a hold of the trail, you see it on the mind maps. You'll be able to access it and find it through Google Maps. Again, so many different types of stone types, different types of trees as well. A lot of them, again, are great examples of the different kind of occupations, shops, etc. in the area. And then basically in the Gorbals in the very early 1900s, there was 90,000 people in the area. And a great example of different kind of industries and commerce within. Getting a little bit windy at the cemetery at this corner. Got a little wind pocket. Apologies for Mother Nature, but it's a nice wee example of the life in the cemetery. We've got a lovely little rose bush at this corner, and it seems to blossom every so often, and it's a little symbol, a symbolic aspect for us, especially during the current times we're going through. There's life, there's always light at the end of the tunnel, and it's always nice to see it when we come round for our tours at the flower's still there. That's an urn on top of the headstone, a draped urn. Apparently draped urns represent monumental symbolism, and it represents something in mature years if it's got a drape on it, and if it's an urn without a drape, it's somebody of younger years. Coming up to our next character at the corner, and this is a lady in the cemetery called Agnes Harkness, so we'll get you up to there. If you look at the 250,000 burials, there's so many different kind of aspects of Glasgow life, and one of the common questions that we get is, when was the last burial in the Southern Necropolis? The Southern Necropolis is an active cemetery, as in you can get buried in it. I don't mean it's active in a lot of different ways, but you can get buried in it if you've got a lair in it and you've got a family linked to the lair. So the last burial was in 2007 in the central section of the cemetery. As again, the graves range at the early days of the cemetery for 21 shillings, 52 and 6 and 36 and 9, and if you go to the walls it was £9 to £12 to go around the edge of it. Variations in prices could obviously be determined by the depth of the grave, how near you were to the gatehouse, how near you were to a path. If there was a path that was decorative features in it, you might pay more. You would also pay more money if you're bringing in for like carriages, hearses and horses, etc. And again, there was a maintenance aspect to the cemetery as well. You come up to the corner of the eastern section at Caledonia Street and Caledonia Road. And again, William Gilmore's Oatlands house would have been not far from here in the back there. It would have been the trees, you'll see it there, at the parking area at the back. That would have been William Gilmore's Oatlands house. We're going to take you to the grave now of Agnes Harkness. And this is an illustration of Agnes. And Agnes Harkness was known as the heroine of Matagorda. There was the Battle of Matagorda in Spain in 1810. She was stationed there with her husband James Reston and their 4-year-old son. And the fortress at that time became under heavy fire. The soldiers were wounded and they were really hemmed in, they couldn't get out. Agnes, being the Glasgow woman that she was, grabbed the buckets, ran across the field of fire, bringing back water and supplies back to the fortress. When Agnes came back to Glasgow, her husband passed away, and Agnes sadly ended up in the poorhouse in Glasgow. But they set up, people found out about her, and they set up a kind of support campaign for her. and Queen Victoria found out about it, and so many different people contributed money to it, and she lived her life in respectable poverty, and she was a very active character at the time. So I'll now hand you back over to John and Christine.
There's no doubt that Agnes Harkness was an extremely brave woman. I'm going to do a wee song now. To me it speaks volumes about the futility of war through the generations, and it's called The Old Man's Song. Was at the turning o' the century, I was a lad of 5. My father went to fight the Boers, he never come back alive. My ma was left to bring us up, no charity she'd seek. She'd rub, she'd scrub, she'd wash the floors in 7 and 6 a week. Now I left the school at 12 years, I went to find a job. We growing kids, me ma was glad of the extra couple of bob. And though that longer schooling would have stood me in great stead, you can't afford refinements when you're struggling for your bread. And then the Great War came along, I didn't hesitate. I took the Royal Shilling and went off to do me bit. I fought in mud and tears and blood 3 years or thereabout. And I caught some gas in Flanders and got invalided out. My daughter, then 26, a general strike found me out on the street. Though I'd a wife and kids be then, their needs I had to meet. But a brand new world was coming wi' a brotherhood o' man. When the struggle it was over, we were back where we began. I wandered through the 30s, out of work now and again. I saw the black shirts marching and the things they did in Spain. I brought me kids up decent, sure I taught them wrong from right. But Hitler was the man who came and showed them how to fight. My daughter was a land girl, she got married to a Yank. My eldest son received a gong for stopping Rommel's tanks. He caught some shrapnel in the side, he convalesced in Rome. Get married to a night, I nurse didn't bother to come home. My daughter writes me once a month a cheery little note about her coloured telly and those other things she's got. She has a boy, a likely lad, he's nearly 21. She tells me that he's been called up to fight in Vietnam. Well, I'm living on the pension now, it doesn't go too far. For a life that always seemed to be like one long bloody war. When I think of how it might have been, it makes me want to cry. Well, I don't know how to change things, but by Christ we've got to try.
I'd just like to read a poem that I wrote this year and was included in the Voice for Aaron digital newsletter, so a wee shout out and a thanks to Elsie for that. I'd like to dedicate this poem to all the parents in the Gorbals and over Glasgow who strive so hard to bring up their children, and it's about my own family, and it's called Jimmy, 5 Daughters. 1912, baby born, Third Wayne, first boy to Isabella Lockhead, David Quarrell. 314 Rutherglen Road, tenement Gorbals. Trams trundled past as baby arrived. He came into the world, survival tenuous, given mortality figures of that time. Survive wee Jimmy did. My father, Jimmy 5 daughters, think he'd be proud of his clan today. Our generation can never truly know our parents' struggles, only that times were hard, striving for better for their children, impossible tasks, World War I cannon fodder, unemployment, poverty, slum housing, overcrowding, many diseases at every door. World War II, massive losses, no visionary National Health Service until 1948. Now, in my elder self, I consider, I reflect, I see their strengths, their stamina, their guts. I offer up heartfelt thanks, blessings for their spirits, sometimes broken, of resistance.
Great contributions again there from John and Christine. They were nearly finished at the end of our tour, folks, but there's one gentleman in the southern Necropolis that we couldn't go without giving a mention to. A name that you'll all know. His surname, more than anything, is Lipton. And those of you who recently tried Lipton's iced tea, or Lipton's tea of course, my favourite is the peach flavour, will know, that may not know of the man Sir Thomas Lipton. And this is the grave of the great man himself, the wee photograph of him. And Sir Thomas Lipton and his family. Sir Thomas Lipton and his family came from Crown Street in a tenement in 10 Crown Street. He was born on May the 10th, 1850 and died October the 2nd, 1931. Known for so many great things, Sir Thomas Lipton. One of the greatest things that he did was his tea, obviously, and his yacht races that he tried to win. He was known as being a great sportsman. Also famous for Lipton's orphans, which were pigs that used to walk through the streets of Glasgow to advertise his shop, and he used to stop the traffic, and it would be great publicity for him. And he kind of always thought that no publicity is bad publicity if it get named Lipton in it. So we're going to get a little song, and we're going to actually finish here because I know our time's getting a bit tight. We've got another contribution from Christine, but we'll do a little song in dedication to Sir Thomas Lipton. I'm sure he'd appreciate it. So we've got some little props at the side that Christine and John will get out, and I'm going to join in. So hopefully at this point you won't switch off. You hear that Colin's going to get involved. And this is dedicated to the great man, Sir Thomas Lipton. And I'll come in a little closer with the microphone, and hopefully you'll get us all in. I'm going to join in. Here we go.
I like a nice cup of tea in the morning,
for to start the day, you see. And at 11:30, well, my idea of heaven is a nice cup of tea. I like a nice cup of tea with my dinner, and a nice cup of tea with my tea. And when it's time for bed, there's a lot to be said for a nice cup of tea. I like a nice cup of tea with my dinner. I like a nice cup of tea with my tea. And when it's getting late, almost anything can wait for a nice cup of tea.
And I've got to
Cheers.
dedicate that to Donald.
Sir Thomas Lipton. Now Christina, we'll get you ready for your
Yes.
wee contribution.
Here.
Yeah, we'll do it here.
Okay, I'm just going to get
Again folks, Sir Thomas Lipton, great character, still asked about to this day, and a local lad from Crown Street. If you go to the new Gorbals Park at the moment, there's a circular park area just up from Crown Street. You walk into the park heading south, just step into the park, you're roughly in the location of the tenement where Sir Thomas Lipton's family lived, and the shop was in 11 Crown Street that his father had. So I'm going to try and get a little shelter from the wind. Pass this over to Christina. Hand it over. Sir Thomas Lipton down there. We'll mic you up. There you go.
This is a poem I wrote in 1982, and I dedicate it to all those good folk that had happy times growing up in the tenements, and particularly to my own family in the tenements of the Gorbals. It's called The Close Mouth. Wains greeting, folks meeting, toilets flushing, lassies gushing, men walking, women talking, sills sunning, dogs running, middens clattering, smells battering, tenements throbbing, searheads sobbing, couples winching, doughballs mincing, east, west, north, south, all life began at the Close Mouth.
Well, there you have it, folks. That's our contribution to this year's Doors Open Festival. I'd like to thank everybody for Glasgow Building Preservation Trust who worked hard in the background to get this whole project up and running. Obviously the present time that we're living in at the moment is unique in so many aspects of it, but it's great that it all went ahead. And in a kind of strange sense, everything being online means we're kind of archived. So we're all archived now, we're all history, if you like. And thanks to my great wife Elsie in the background there with the camera. We just want to extend a welcome to the Southern Necropolis as well. If you're ever in the Gorbals area, you want to come down for a visit in the future. There's so many things to find out in the cemetery, so many stories to be told, so many benefits from it. We'd like to finish by dedicating it again to the late Charlotte Hutt, whose drive behind the project, and she knew the future for the Southern Necropolis, she knew exactly what it had to offer. We'd all just like to finish by dedicating it to Charlotte and by saying, Southern Necropolis, there's life in the city of the dead. Thanks very much. Take care. Thank you.